Rudi Goblen, welcome to Cultural Attache.
Hey, hey, hey.
You are the playwright and composer of Little Boy, Little Man, which is having its world premiere at the Geffen Playhouse in Los Angeles through November 2nd. So for people who aren't in LA or haven't had a chance to see it, could you just give me a brief synopsis of Little Boy, Little Man, please?
Sure, absolutely. Little Boy, Little Man is the tale of two Nicaraguan brothers, Fíto and Bastian, who have to move in with one another after a big loss in the family. And while living together, have to reconcile with the differences and the distance that has existed between the brothers, as well as their own histories here in this country.
Terrific. Well, let's talk about this play's history a little bit because I know in 2019, your play Fito, a concert play, was put on at the Fisher Center for the Performing Arts. What
Yeah.
is that piece's relationship to Little Boy, Little Man?
Yeah. So without giving away too much, Fito is the cousin, brother, sister play to Little Boy, Little Man, and there is something that goes on with the character Fito in Little Boy, Little Man, which I like to keep as as a secret, I guess. And I started kind of thinking about what if that didn't happen to Fito, and what would be the alternative quote unquote universe that he could live in. And so I started playing around with those ideas when the Fisher Center commissioned me for the piece, and so I wrote the play Fito, which is basically it's the day of his naturalization ceremony. He's becoming a citizen after 30 years of being in the country. And when he raises his hand to do the oath of allegiance, he is snapped back into the last 30 years of his life in this country and what it has taken him to get to this day. And all those stories, and his story is told through funk songs, spoken word, monologues, and dance.
You also workshopped Little Boy, Little Man at the Geffen before you got an actual production
Yeah,
for it. What did you learn from that workshop, and how has that informed the play that audiences can now see?
sure, sure. Yes, we workshopped the play. The workshop was more for just a little more background about the piece. This was a Little Boy Little Man was my thesis production while I was at Yale University. So the production had gone up already. The script was pretty much in a solid place before we brought it to the Geffen. And the workshop that we did in February was more so for a couple of reasons. We wanted to get into the room, me and the director, since it was going to be our first time working together. There were a lot of questions that we had around how the music was going to be existing throughout the play, which I had changed a bit from its thesis production. And yeah, and it was just giving us a chance to be in the room together as collaborators, and figure each other out, how we work, how we want to work, and basically prepare us for the true rehearsal process that was going to happen this August. And so uh, yeah, it was pretty much for us to like play around. There were some tweaks that happened during that workshop, but that workshop was more so for us to figure out each other as collaborators, get a head start on the music so that when we jump into rehearsal, we could be ready to go. This play is very much intertwined with the music that lives inside of it. So it's not a play that one can just sit down and read. Like even at the reading, I of this play, we would have to have musicians present to be able to do that. So there is a kind of like a uh, yeah, there is a little bit of work that needs to be done before we even start to work, and that workshop was part of that. Yeah,
And I'm somebody who has only read the play, I haven't seen it, so I had to use my own imagination, knowing the style of music that's used to get a
yeah,
sense of what it might be like, which I
yeah,
guess is not a bad way to read your play.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you.
May not be a specific way to read your play, but it's not a bad way. I mean, you
Yeah.
want to invite people's imagination into what they're seeing, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. It's like yeah, it's why I love theater, or it's why I love live theater. It's why I love live performance. It's I have my goal with my work is always to create a space that is as much for the audience as it is for the performers. And yeah, being seen, being witnessed by the audience, and knowing that they are being witnessed by us just creates a different kind of energy that I always search for in every work that I create.
But you wouldn't mind if you had a show that was so successful it was on at the Winter Garden in New York, would you? One of the largest houses on Broadway.
I mean, even I think if we did get into one of those spaces, I would be racking my brain to figure out how to close that circle, you know. I yeah, I it's just the kind of theater that I love, you know. Yeah,
I
yeah.
get it. Now, in terms of the two brothers, Fito and Bastian, which of the two is most like you, assuming that the adage, you write what you know, applies to this play?
They're both very much me. They're both very much my brothers, my cousins, my best friends, and other men who I've met in my life. There's a lot of there's a lot of everyone in them. Uh, I'm sure you saw they're very complex characters, very nuanced characters, with a lot of hopes and dreams uh, and vast histories. And so, yeah, I jump in and out from both characters.
When you see two actors bringing these characters to life, do you look at them and go, at different performances, you go, no, I think I'm a little bit more Fito.
Well, it's funny. It's funny watching people watch the play and try to figure out who I am or who someone is. But you know that who I am might only exist in one sentence or maybe like a scene or maybe not even a whole scene, right? It's more about for me. It's all more about rhythms and intentions, and those just kind of like come in and out throughout the whole piece. The younger actor, the actor who's playing the younger brother, um, does kind of look like he could be a cousin of mine. So that is always a trip looking at him. Marlon Vargas, who is an amazing talent and just a star all around. I met him while I was at Yale University, and actually that's how I met him. Someone was like, "There's this guy who kind of looks like you, and we think you guys should work together." And yeah, and recently, shortly after that, we connected.
Yale was really good to you because, a lot of people say, one of the best things that comes out of college are relationships. I
Yeah.
mean, being at Yale it proved pretty fruitful for you, didn't it?
I did meet some of the most beautiful collaborators and close friends that I have in my life at the moment, which is one of the reasons why I decided to go to grad school, just to expand my circle of collaborators. And and I did. I met some really beautiful people, beautiful artists who I'm, you know, looking forward to creating more work with.
Now, in reading the play, it seems to me that on the surface, Fito's desire to be an artist is completely at odds with his brother's desire to work hard, and live the American dream. But I think you can argue that Fito is also pursuing his version of the American dream. What do you want to represent most about this relationship between these two brothers and what they want to accomplish with their lives?
Um, the term American Dream obviously throughout the play, or because, excuse me, while the play has been going, has been coming up a lot, right? And I think it's easy to think about old versions of the American dream, right? Like from when it was first coined to maybe the 60s to maybe the 80s. Um, and even maybe now, which it's that term is in the most flux it's ever been since its coining. In the play for me, the American dream is very simple for Bastian, right? He I think it's easy to think because he wants to change his name, because he wants to become an American citizen, that he is, searching for the atomic family, white picket fence, um, loads of money, and actually he just wants to survive. He just wants to be okay. He just wants to go about his day. He just wants to live a life and not deal with racism and prejudice and harassment. And he wants to, in a sad way, disappear. He wants to be invisible. And he believes that assimilating and in a specific way, and or becoming an American citizen will allow him to do that and get rid of the history that he carries, not only inside him but uh, uh, physically as well. Um, and in Fito's terms, his American dream is that he is able to dream. He believes that he is free to dream, and he does, and he runs with that. he runs with the idea of being able to dream as free as possible, where you know it's not necessarily always possible and or true because of who he is, and who he can be to specific people and to specific systems. And so I wanted to play about. I wanted to play with that, and I wanted to explore that and see where what kind of conversations can come up, um, while exploring that.
You couldn't possibly know when this was put on the Geffen's calendar what would be going on in the world at the time that the play was on. So is our current events a curse or a blessing for Little Boy, Little Man?
I would definitely. I don't know if I would use either word, to be honest. I don't know if I would use curse or blessing. It is very interesting, maybe even sad. I wrote this play 7 years ago, and the fact that things that are happening in the play are still happening and or happening at a much more intense level. um it's interesting how it's landing in the ears, how it's landing on the bodies that are sharing space with us, right? And I do think there probably have been some people, some audiences who have maybe imagined that I'm writing this piece as a as a reply and or as a uh, yeah, as a way to speak to what is happening. The sad part is that it was written almost 8 years ago. um and yeah, and it's interesting how those lines change because of the polis and because of what is happening around us, right? There is a line in the play where Fito says, Bastian's like, become an American citizen. How long, how many times you're going to renew your green card? And then Fito's like, oh, I'm not wasting my money on that. The passport doesn't mean anything. They can take that away from you. And Bastian's like, no, they can't. And Fito's like, well, not yet, but wait until they create a law that says they can. And years ago, that line would catch a laugh, or that line would go, oh my God, Fito's such a Fito's such a wild guy, and now when he says it, there's like a hush, there's like a there's like a oh, there's like a there's a weight that happens, and an energy that shifts in the room when he says that. So it's just really interesting to see how, yeah, how words land differently because of current events.
In the script that I read, you have a preface that you want readers to get a sense of what you're thinking, and you want them to think about when they go into the play. And you ask a question: How do I get readers and audiences to enter this world without bias?
Yeah.
Have you come up with an answer to that question based on what you're seeing in these performances?
I I I think that's the probably the bane of my existence as a brown man, as a brown writer, right? Because there is so much media that has already told or has presented Black and brown communities in specific ways. So it is very hard, to combat those ideas, those archetypes, those tropes. The way of also even something simple as the aesthetic of storytelling that's being used, the devices of storytelling that's being used. Um, Most people get their storytelling from TV. TV has a very specific formula, right? I'm sure you noticed on the script I play a lot with structure and or how I want to tell the story and how music comes in to tell the story. I play with spoken word. I play with street performance, the dream world, the memory world, realism, and jumping in and out of those things, in a way that felt exciting to me and interesting to me as an artist. So all I can do is present something that feels good to me, feels exciting to me, feels like something that I would want to see, that I would want to be part of, and or that I feel is a an offering to the actors that I'm looking for, the kind of performers that I'm looking for, who I think are looking for this specific kind of work as well, and then just present it. My job is, as a chef, just to cook the meal, and 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 how people eat it is is up to them.
But you do have talkbacks each week, so you get a sense of how what they felt about the meal that they've just consumed
Correct.
as
Correct.
well. How are I know that in talkbacks, people like to, exalt themselves as being enlightened and things like that, because they don't want to risk ridicule in public. But, you know, do you think you've succeeded in getting them to quote, as you say, see these men under the umbrellas of love?
I believe, yes, absolutely. It's been really overwhelming, the feedback that we've been getting, the responses that we've been getting, the emails that I've been receiving, the DMs and text messages that I've been receiving, um, the perfect strangers who I've never met in my life, sharing very intimate and beautiful stories with me, and or histories and or family uh, histories that have come up for them during this piece. It's also been really beautiful to see the Nicaraguan community just feel seen and feel heard and feel accepted, which was one of my goals writing this play. Right, I could not find a play within the Western theater canon that existed with Nicaraguan characters, let alone two Nicaraguan brothers growing up in Miami, Florida. And so, which is, Miami, Florida is has the biggest Nicaraguan population in the country, San Francisco being the second. And so, as a Nicaraguan American playwright from Miami, Florida, I thought it was my duty to bring these brothers into the Western theater canon, just to have a play that existed about Nicaraguans, right? And you know, and that was my goal alone. But to see how the the Nicaraguan community has been showing up and has been reacting to it has been very beautiful for me. And yeah.
Well, I remember when I was much younger and I saw the touring production of the musical Dreamgirls. And it was
Mm-hmm.
at the Schubert Theater, which used to exist in Century City, which is, no longer there.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed with how many people of color came out to see the show
Yeah.
that I realized immediately, well, it's because they can see themselves on stage.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's what absent these opportunities to see other Nicaraguans on stage, where can they find culture? What do they do for culture in a city like Los Angeles?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Absent seeing themselves on stage prior to your play, what opportunities do Nicaraguans have to see themselves in culture in a city like Los Angeles?
That's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. I've recently moved to LA and just made a year, literally in September, and I'm very much figuring out what the theatrical scene is here in LA. I'm interested in engaging with it. I'm interested in uplifting it, in activating it. Um, but I do have a lot of questions about it as well. But very excited to learn about it.
Well, and hopefully there's more than either one of us recognizes at this particular moment in time. In that same preface, you said, "I love these men, not only as brown-bodied characters I have written, but as beautiful, compelling humans I am encouraged by." How are you encouraged by Fito and Ben Bastian?
That's a good question. Thank you for asking that. Um, things that come to mind. I love the way Fito dreams. It's There's a radical imagination to him that I never want to lose. One of my fears, as if we can get intimate for a second, one of my one of my fears that as I get older and you know uh, yeah, just live on this planet is to stop learning, is to stop dreaming, is to stop wanting to be, is to stop being in awe of the magic of life. And Fito very much so is just drenched in that radical imagination and in that awe of life, which I think is such a beautiful, one of my favorite characteristics or traits that character has. And Bastian's methodical diligence and also warm rigor that he has, right? Where he has to constantly shift from being a parent to being a brother, and how to and knowing when to be a parent and knowing when to be a brother, and knowing when to get a little stern, but also get stern with love. And I think at the root of both of these traits that I'm talking about is compassion, between the brothers, and that was very important to me. Because they were raised by their mother and grandmother, that regardless of the ideas of masculinity that they are wrestling with, or that they think they have to perform and or wear and or fight against, at the root of that is also this femininity and this uh, 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 compassion and grace and love and respect and acknowledgement that exists within the brothers, whether they're conscious of it sometimes or sub or not, you know.
Well, I think the bottom line to answering your own question about whether you can still maintain the qualities that these characters have is as long as you're curious, you will always have those qualities.
Very true. Very true.
One thing I'm curious about is in section 10, Fito has a line where he talks about how people from different countries all hate each other.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then, which I don't think is ultimately the point. The point
Mm-hmm.
is the line that follows it, where he says, I get it. No one wants to be lumped into one thing, which I
Mm-hmm.
know is a real problem. I mean, I'm married to a Guatemalan,
Yeah.
so I know. What are the challenges you have faced in your own career, with casting directors when you wanted to be an actor, or theater companies, or even dance companies and others who do exactly what Fido complains about?
Well, let me talk to that first, the leading up to the line that you're talking about, because colorism within the Latinx community was also one of the things that I wanted to have a conversation about in this play, and which is a conversation that is important to me and a conversation I don't think we hear enough about. I think the word racism and colorism exists in many different conversations and many different iterations. Miami is this special place where where you can experience colorism in a way that you can't experience in a lot of places in this country, right? And because Miami is this melting pot of Cubans, Guatemalans, Salvadorians, Hondurans, Nicaraguans, Colombians, Venezuelans, Brazilians, Argentinians, Chileans, um, you do get a specific kind of situation that uh, that is sometimes hard to explain, but also um, hard to maneuver. And there is truth to what he is saying, that it is hard sometimes for these countries and these people and these communities to live under the umbrella of Latinidad and or Latinos or Latinas or Latina communities, because they want to be represented by what it is that they are or where they are from. And that usually comes from not only a sense of pride, but a sense of ego, or ego and or trauma, and or hatred and or negative histories between the countries. And so there is very much there is very a lot of truth to what he is saying leading up to that line where he says, nobody wants to be lumped up into one thing. They all want to be special. um so it is a conversation that's important to me, which is why I put it in there. To answer your question, um, you know, I mean, I can go on for, it's been a long life. I can go on for a while talking about the things that I've encountered, the prejudice that I've encountered, the microaggressions that I've encountered, the racism that I've encountered as a multicultural, multiracial body in the industry. Um, but my goal is to show how nuanced and how complex and how rich uh, a body like mine is, um, which is why I wrote this piece.
Anytime somebody writes a piece that throws a real curveball to the audience, and I don't want to get into specifics of what happens in the play,
Yeah.
what what was the thought process you had so that you could lead an audience to a place where that would resonate the way you needed it and wanted it to?
Yeah. What was the thought process? Well, without giving things away, uh, you know, okay, this is I'm gonna speak myself into meaning. Okay, uh, I, I'm not sure if I believe in long plays. For me, I hear people give like, "Oh, be ready, it's pretty long. It's a long play. It's 2.5 hours. Oh, no intermit or whatever." For me, it really comes down to rhythm and pace. And I've seen 30-minute performances that have felt like 4 hours. And I've seen 3 hour plays that have felt like 80 minutes, right? And so for me, it's about rhythm, it's about pace, and knowing when that rhythm needs to pick up, when it needs to slow down, when it needs to shift. Um, uh, and it's something that I'm always keeping my ear on. I, as I shared with you earlier, I've been a dancer for 30 years of my life. I'm a poet, I'm a spoken word artist. So rhythm is just embedded into the language, which is then also embedded into the way that scenes are built. And if I step away from the play and look at the scenes, all those turn into the play now becomes a paragraph and the scenes are the sentences. And I need to see how what I can edit within each sentence to make this paragraph feel um, cohesive and uh, like the paragraph that I'm trying to get at. And so to answer your question, it really comes from intuition. It really comes from um, you know, I think I can even say it comes from being a street performer. It comes from being a host. I hosted events for cabaret and burlesque for many years at nightclubs. It comes from from poetics, from being from being a poet, knowing when to give the audience something, knowing when to pull back, when they're going to need to be lifted, when they're going to need to be left alone, when they're going to need to be activated, when they're going to need to be engaged with. So there's a lot of like, you know, which I already used talking about Bastian, methodical diligence that goes into the structuring of these scenes. If what you're talking about happened a scene earlier, it would not have the same impact. Um, if it happened a little bit later, it would not have the same impact. But because we're at the we're at the place in the play where Bastian shows up and they have this moment, him and his little brother, because then we get this beautiful poem from Fíto, and we get to see him realize himself in a way that we haven't seen him do so throughout the play, because we see him find his voice, this free voice that can speak in a way that he's been trying to find throughout the play, where he steps away from the microphone and he's like, I don't need I don't need this microphone. Actually, all I need is myself. I am enough. Um, and yeah, and that felt like the right moment, right? As complex as that is, that felt like, okay, well, this is where um these systems that I have been talking about throughout the play, um, they show up. They show up. That's it. It's when they show up. And so it just made sense to me that um, what you're talking about made sense then.
And for anybody who's curious, they can buy a ticket and go see the play.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, you talked about this is the moment where Fito finds his voice. At what point do you feel like you found your voice?
That's interesting. I've been writing a very long time, Craig. I've been, I, 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 I would say, I started beatboxing and rapping and at a very, very young age, 6, 7, 8 years old. I had an older brother. I have an older brother, who's 7 years older than me, who was very much into the hip hop culture. And so from a very young age, I have been into making sounds with my voice, into riddles, into onomatopoeias, into alliterations, and uh, and yeah, from a very young age, I started rapping. I think that was when I realized that voice was something that I wanted to embrace. Um, but it has shifted many times throughout the years, because of interests and yeah, the growing of that a human does. Um, but I would say, I think I find my voice with every piece, in a different way, because I try to challenge myself, um, structurally, textually, um, every time that I create a work. And so my hope is to always grow, in some kind of way and have these plays chronicle that growth, years later.
Well, we'll finish. That's perfect segue to the last question I wanted to ask you, Rudy, which
Yeah.
was 14 years ago, you did an interview with Neil de la Flor, and you were
Yeah.
asked, why do you dance? And your answer was, it's the closest I get to flying.
Yeah.
So 14 years later, why do you write?
Why do I write? Hmm. You know, the thing that want the immediate answer is I write because I have to. I write because I need to. Um, and and I think that yeah, I think that's the immediate answer. If I could add to it, it's I went to grad school to study playwriting at the School of Drama because when I got into theater early 2000s, um, I became part of a theater company called D Projects, Teo Cassiano's D Projects. And it was the first space that I was part of where, so it was a all black and brown male company, dance theater company. And it was the first space that I was part of as a young brown man that I could be vulnerable around other black and brown men in a way that I had never been able to be vulnerable. One, and two, in a way that I had never been able to be vulnerable around other black and brown young men. As I got older, I traveled as an artist, as a theater artist, as a dance theater artist, as a dancer, as a spoken word artist, as a teacher. I found myself, 20 years later, after having a solo performance career, a dance career, I found myself asking the question of like, what now? What's next for me? And am I good here? I was teaching at the time. I was teaching acting for dancers and movement for actors, and I thought about that first company that I was in, and I thought about creating something like that myself. I still have the hopes or the dream of doing that one day, creating a company, a theater company, similar to that one. But really, what came up for me was, you know, understanding that there are not a lot of spaces that are like that for Black and Brown communities. And there are not a lot of pieces, a lot of plays, a lot of performance art pieces or visual art and uh, or characters that people can play. And so one of the reasons why I decided to go to the School of Drama was to create a body of work that would then allow people to play in the way that they play. Well, and to be specific, Black and Brown people, Black and Brown artists, um, and then create that body of work, and not only that body of work, but create yeah, create that work for these communities. Um, and when I say work, also, I think often people think that I'm talking about artwork, but I'm also talking about jobs. Like, and I left the school, the drama, with 7 plays where I was like, here you go, right? Here you go. You these all of these are jobs that you can give to black and brown musicians, actors, drag queens, you know, poets, spoken word artists, and now you have the blueprint and or the offering for these communities. And so I do think that that very much so is one of the things that drives my writing at the moment. Um, uh, you know, to create work for Black and Brown communities, to bring back the poetics into playwriting. I miss dense language. I miss heightened stylized language in the theater. I think theater is very much plot driven at the moment, and or for shock value and or for commercial uh, and capital purposes. And I very much miss language, like beautiful language in the theater. Which is another thing that drives me to the page is like, how can I say I love you to somebody in a way that we haven't heard before, so that we have new language and new ways to do things like that, right? And so those are the two things that are coming to mind right now. Yeah, to create body of work for Black and Brown communities, and to leave my mark as a poet and as a writer in the theater.